You're listening to Secrets of a Bridal Seamstress podcast. I'm your host, Nadine Bozeman. In this podcast, I'm sharing business systems and strategies specifically tailored to the bridal sewing industry so you can build your own modern and profitable bridal alterations business. Join me as I also get to chat with fellow seamstresses and share their personal success stories. I'm so glad you're here and that we can grow together in this unique trade. Welcome to the 100th episode of Secrets of a Bridal Seamstress podcast. I kind of can't believe that we're here. Wow. So thank you for tuning in. If today is your first episode, or I don't know if you've been here since the very beginning and maybe you've listened to literally all 100 episodes, thank you for sticking around. And I guess maybe a bigger thank you to those of you who have been here for a long time, because that means you've probably seen a lot of versions of me along the way as I've been growing in this podcast thing. You've probably witnessed several cringy moments. I know that I've experienced some embarrassing moments that unfortunately are recorded. So thank you for being here. A podcast can't be here without its audience. So thank you so much for not just listening, but for sharing your wins with me. I love when you DM me on Instagram or you reply to my emails and you share stories with me and you send me encouragement. It just means so much. And when starting this podcast, I just want to talk about bridal alterations and what I did. And if you were here from the very beginning, you'll remember that the first few episodes were actually for brides to talk about the bridal alterations experience. And then what ended up happening is I was hearing from fellow seamstresses who were like, oh my goodness, you're talking about what I do. I don't know anybody who does what I do. And then there were questions about running the business or those kind of things. So I was like, you know what? I feel like this content needs to be for bridal seamstresses, not about bridal seamstresses. And that's when everything totally changed, because shortly after the content changed, the membership started. That was the fall of 2021. September 2021 was when the membership opened. And ever since then, it's kind of been crazy. So it just grew so quickly. So thank you for being along for the journey. Today, I want to share some things that I have learned along the way, some sage wisdom from 100 episodes. It's really nothing mind-blowing, just to give you a heads up. And each of these things can definitely be applied to life beyond a podcast. So I hope that this episode can encourage you. And if you're thinking about doing something maybe scary and big, whether it's starting the bridal alterations business or starting a podcast of your own or starting a new brand, I hope that these 3 tips will help you and encourage you, and also remind you that if things are harder than you think they're going to be, you're not alone. So let's dive in. Oh, and also at the end of the episode, I'm going to share a major change that is coming to the SBS membership. So as you've seen in the show notes, we're closing. So that is a pretty big change, but it's for a good reason. And I'm going to get into all that after I get through these 3 podcast takeaways. Okay, so let's dive in. So takeaway number 1, this is, by the way, these are all taken from my own experience, things that I've learned from other seamstresses that I have interviewed, and even these sewing celebrities that I definitely was fangirling over when I was interviewing. All of these things come from all of our experiences collectively. Okay. So number 1, nobody really knows what they're doing. That is lesson number 1. So when I meet people who are way farther ahead than I am, or these bigger names in the industry, and I've been a little bit nervous to interview them, and I'm okay, I want to make sure my questions are ready, and how does my lipstick look and all the things. I guess I expect them to have all the answers from the very beginning. When I ask their story, I want to hear that it's oh, I knew I wanted to do this, so these are the steps that I took, and I did it in this order, and it all worked out great, and I had all the answers before I started. Because I guess there's a part of me who wants life to be that way still, and guess what? It's not that way for anybody. So nobody really knows what they're doing, and I think the trick is to just dive in and try the thing, even when you don't know. And there's nobody out there who does know right off the bat. So it's normal. If you've been listening to episodes and you're hearing stories from whether it's fellow bridal seamstresses or designers or pattern designers, they start in a different career, or they'll pursue education in something other than sewing. Most of us did not go to school for sewing or design. And yet here we are, right? It takes a lot of decisions made along the way. It doesn't mean that they're wrong decisions, but it takes just different stops on our journey to lead us to where we're supposed to be. And so each step of the way, like nobody knows what they're doing when they first get there, right? Just like life. We're just all trying to figure it out as we go along. And if you feel like you're about to start something that feels scary and unknown, just know that you're not alone, because everybody who's ever done something cool in their life has not known what they're doing. Or anybody who has had success in something, or like, oh my goodness, this is my ticket to a six-figure business, or whatever it is, they've all started not really knowing what they're doing. And they may look it because they may seem very confident, but they still don't know what they're doing. Number two, you ready for this one? Everyone starts off a little bit scared. And some of us are still a little scared. I feel like I will always be scared of something to a certain extent for the rest of my life. So we've heard the phrase like, oh, be fearless. Ugh. I actually have a necklace that says that, like fearless. But actually, there's no such thing as being fearless, because fear is an emotion that we're given to protect us from like physical harm, emotional harm, making dumb decisions, right? It is a protective measure that we just have like built into ourselves. So it's impossible to be fearless. Takes the pressure off, okay? Nobody's asking you to be fearless, but you can make some choices, or you can build your bravery muscles so you can live fearing less. Okay. So you can make more bold moves, some brave moves, and less fearful moves, right? But if it helps you feel any better, if nobody knows what they're doing, like we talked about in point number one, everybody's going to feel a little bit scared, because we all feel nervous when we do new things or when we don't know what we're doing. And when I'm hearing stories of people that I'm interviewing, and it'll come up, in different, they'll use different words to describe it, but it's fear. Like, oh, I just felt really nervous, or I didn't know what the next move should be, or I took this big financial risk. We put so much money into starting this business, or you name it. It's fear. And I'm like, oh, I know that feeling. I can relate to that, right? So when you're talking to anybody, whether it's in our field or any entrepreneur, they may have come over that fear, but they still had to get over the fear, right? They're maybe past it now, but they had to face it at some point. So sometimes when we're looking at successful people and we're seeing, oh my gosh, they've gotten so much accomplished, or they just seem so confident, like they don't second guess themselves. Well, it's because they had to overcome fears in the past, and they have already dealt with those fears. But for the next big steps that they're going to take, they're going to have to overcome the next set of fears, right? It's just kind of part of being human. So some of the things that I have overcome in the past few years. Number one, the fear of raising my prices. I know that you all can relate to that. Okay. I got over my fear of raising prices. I got over my fear of saying no to clients that I'm like, ooh, we're not a good fit. I can sense it in their emails. This isn't going to work. So I figured out how to word that in a really kind way. And I got over my fear of saying no. Something that I'm still learning. I haven't completely got over this one, but I hope that you can still relate to this. I am more afraid of people's opinions than I would like to admit. And I feel like I've come a long way through that. God has helped me to focus on what he's called me to do, who he's called me to serve and to speak to with this podcast. And so I'm not as afraid. I'm using that as afraid of people's opinions, or like some DMs that might come through or whatever. And that used to be like really crippling for me. Like I would be afraid to share like my basic like scheduling, or my opinions on things, or like how I do stuff, because I was afraid of somebody else's opinions. Maybe they have a louder voice and they would call me out, or they would like send me a DM about it. Like I just these weird scenarios that we get in our head, right? And those type of fears can just limit us so much. And I think that that's common actually for a lot of people, is like just the fear of people's opinions, right? So whatever you're doing with your business, that could also apply to like a fear of a bad review or whatever. It's like people's words against us can be so hurtful. And I've had a couple big lessons, and I've had to learn too that I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I'm not trying to, um, I'm not trying to not be somebody's cup of tea, but it's like, if that's the case, I have to let it go and I have to be okay with that and just move forward and keep moving to the next thing or keep doing what I'm doing and not let that be such a crippling distraction. And I'd like to say that like I have thick skin, but I don't really have thick skin. And I don't think I ever will. And I think that's how God made me and it's okay. And it's just part of who I am. And I feel like that's part of what Secrets of Bridal Seamstress is because of that. Maybe it just helps us all be a little more vulnerable because the leader doesn't have thick skin. I don't know. But yeah, there were definitely a couple situations in the past few years that have showed me like, okay, I can't force this person to like me, or I can't force this friendship to work out. I can't force this opinion from so and so. It's like you can't convince this listener to, really understand where you're coming from or whatever. It's like so many just little things. Now they're little things, but when I was going through them, yeah, they felt like big things. And whenever you put yourself out there with a business idea or anything, I feel like that includes your opinion, honestly, it's normal to feel scared of people, of what the reaction will be. And you don't need to be saying anything confrontational or divisive for someone to disagree with you, right? So it just is part of being human and also being human and doing something public. And whenever we have a business, that is something public, right? So it's okay to be scared if you're feeling nervous about stuff and like, fear of not knowing what you're doing or fear of the next step. It's normal. And I promise you that really cool things come on the other side of that. And I feel like the things that I've learned with going through like some of my biggest fears of, yeah, people not liking me has gotten me so much farther along than I thought it would take me. And so, yeah, there's still times where it's still like I'll still get little stings, but I have resources now. I have like it's funny. I've written a list of like worst possible scenarios, right? Because I feel like as an entrepreneur, sometimes we have to do this. So I've written worst case scenarios, like, and people not liking me is one of them. But on the other side of the column are the resources that I have. So it could be like for me, I have Bible verses. That might not work for everybody who's listening, but I have verses that help me through that. I have friends that can help me through that, or people that I know I can just call and be like, okay, this is a weird thing in my head, help talk me out of it. And then, okay, then it's my responsibility to put that down and move forward. And just as living as an adult, like we're always going to have those situations come up. And so it's really important to have like tools in place so that when you have fears come up, like they happen with everyone, have a healthy way to deal with them so they're not crippling you. There's actually a quote behind me. Can you see it and read it? It says, "You don't have to be fearless. Doing it afraid is just as brave." I love that quote. I don't know if you ever follow Morgan Harper Nichols. She has beautiful poetry that she creates artwork for. So it's like super colorful, really beautiful words. And I love her stuff. I have a few of her quotes actually in my office, but that one is such a good one. So everyone starts off a little scared. A lot of us are still scared. And so if you take anything away from this episode, that is what you can take away. Okay. All right, well, let's move into point number 3. Everything is figure outable. And this is great because this kind of ties in step 1 and 2 together. So when nobody knows what they're doing, everybody's afraid, but the good news is everything is figure outable. So what I've learned from different guests that we've had on the podcast is that there's always a connection somewhere. There's always a free resource available that has helped them get from point A to point B. So if you're feeling like overwhelmed, or if you feel like stuck on your website, or maybe stuck at a certain point in your wedding dress that you don't know how to fix, there's something called social media where there's people available for free to help you. You can make some friends on social media. You can check things out on the YouTubes. In 2024, I feel like there's no excuse for things not to be figure outable, right? And there were plenty of times when I got to a point where I was like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, but I did know who to ask to get help for it. Okay. So let me go like way back to when I first started like Sweet Francis Sewing Co. and I didn't know how to use Canva. Okay. This was like major throwback. And I want to say this was like 2016 or 2017, because I feel like Canva was like new. And I literally cried because I couldn't figure anything out. And I'm like, "Oh," and I had to like journal about it because it was like that traumatic for me. Okay. I didn't know how to use Canva and I was like, I felt so stupid. And I was like, how am I going to start a business when I don't even know how to use Canva? Because that's when I wanted to like take everything seriously and just really like go all in on Sweet Francis So and Co. And I couldn't do anything. So what I ended up doing was just like literally watching a tutorial on YouTube about Canva. And then the more that I used Canva, the better I felt about it. Free resources, okay? When I first started my website, oh gosh, that was also really frightening. And I used Squarespace, which is actually super user friendly, but it was like the 7.0 version. So if you had that, you know what I'm talking about. And it was like not good. I that was another meltdown. I also was crying during that situation. And then I remembered that my brother-in-law is a graphic designer. So yeah. Slight oversight, right? So then I texted him and I was like, "Hey Mark, can you like just set this up for me and pick out some cute colors and some cute fonts and then I can do the rest." But I felt like the colors and the fonts were like the hardest part for me, which is kind of comical now, but yeah. And he did. And then I had a website up within a week because he helped me conquer the stuff that I just could not get past. It was like crippling for me, right? Every step along the way, there have been difficult things and I've just asked for help. And same thing I see it all the time within our membership. Like our members ask for help and it's like, "Oh, here, use this. I've already created this for my business. You can use this." Or if you're not in a membership, you can find similar resources all over the interwebs. Or I'm sure you know somebody who knows somebody who would actually love to help you because they get so excited about helping small business owners or whatever the case may be. Resources abound in real life or on the interwebs, okay, in 2024. So everything truly is figure outable. Sometimes you just need to have a snack, sometimes you need to sleep on it, and then you can figure it out later. But everything's doable. And that's what I keep hearing from these interviews, from when I'm hearing these really cool stories from like sewing influencers or other bridal seamstresses who are like so much farther ahead in their game than I am. And they get stuck at a certain point and then they take a step back and they're like, "Oh, well, I knew who to call for this," or I just had to think about it and then I figured it out. Everything is figure outable. So if you don't know what you're doing and if you feel scared, rest assured you're going to be able to figure it out. It's just a matter of time. Well, I hope that these three groundbreaking discoveries that I've had through the podcast have been helpful for you. And now I know you really want to hear what's happening within our SBS membership and why the doors are closing. So let me dive into that so that you can just take a deep breath. Okay. So we're not closing forever. Don't worry. You knew that wasn't going to happen, right? But what we are doing is we are closing our open enrollment. So the way the membership works right now is we have people can join anytime, right? Anytime throughout the year, anytime throughout the month, you can just become a premium member where that's when you get to attend all of the live calls, or you can become a standard member and that's where you have access to all of the recorded calls within your dashboard. And both kinds of members have access to our circle community, which we have like 6 or 7 chat rooms in there with different topics, and that's a chance to just really connect with the other members. Okay. Let me just take this back to January. Okay, so when we went to Austin in January, I kind of had this epiphany where I was like, I love how intimate our membership is. I love how the women feel confident to be vulnerable, to really share, and I want to protect that. And this whole year, I've been thinking, how do I really nurture intentionally this intimate community, right? And so I've been thinking about limiting the number of members that we have, but I didn't really know how to go about it. So this isn't just like a flippant decision, right? This is something that I've been kind of marinating on throughout the year. So we're going to be closing our doors in the month of August, and then we'll have another open house similar to what we had in June. We're going to have more live calls. You'll have an opportunity to hear from other members, hear their stories, ask them questions about the membership. You're going to get a sneak peek into our circle community so you can see kind of how we communicate with each other in between the member calls. And then you'll have an opportunity to join SBS in mid-September. After that, our doors will close again. So we're going to have closed enrollment at that point. Enrollment will close probably until I think like April or May. I don't know yet because I don't really know when it's going to feel right to open it back up again. The first 8 months after registration closes, so that's gonna be the months of October and November, we're gonna have a boot camp. We're gonna have an 8-week boot camp for seamstresses called the Six Figure Seamstress. I'm so excited about this, and if you've been on my email list and you're getting these six-figure tip of the week emails, that's kinda like a little sampling of what we're gonna dive into for the boot camp. So for 8 weeks, all of our members are going to have access to these live calls where we're gonna cover everything that you need to know to set up your business for success to be a six-figure business in 2025. And it's really up to you of what you want to implement, any changes that you want to make in your own business, but at least every member will have access to those calls and just kind of get this roadmap, like a checklist of, are you doing it right? Are you charging things right? Are you attracting the right clients? Are your contracts set up for success? All of the things that you can think of, how your marketing, how your branding is coming across to your ideal client, so that when it comes to 2025, your financial goals, you're set up for that six-figure year. So that is how we're going to be just blasting like full speed ahead with our new and continuing members in October. And then after the boot camp, we'll resume to our regularly scheduled calls. So the way that the calls are regularly scheduled are the first Tuesday of the month, we have a specific business training, whether that's from me or from somebody from outside the membership who comes in to talk about a specific topic. And that is usually picked out by our members. Somebody will tell me like what they need, and we plan like just a couple months out in advance so that we're like helping members where they are in their businesses IRL, in real life, or in real time, I guess. The second call of the month is our sew along, where we set up our laptops in the sewing studio and we work on a specific bridal sewing technique together, and we share how we do the things. And I've been loving those calls. So this month, the call is about like bust contouring and like bust reshaping. And those are obviously recorded too. So we have where that vault is growing of how we sew the things. And the third call of the month is our girls' night in call. And those are not recorded. They're like super casual. And it's like just a chance to share and troubleshoot. And like I love those calls too. It's like a highlight of the month for me. So anyway, that's what will happen like December through springtime after the boot camp is over. But my goal is that everyone will have the tools that they need as soon as they join the membership. And if we have these returning members, obviously, who have been in the membership for years, they'll be in those calls as well. They'll be learning the material alongside the new members. And if the specific topic is something that they're already implementing in their own business, they'll be able to kind of like share that insight too. But everyone will start with the same education at the same time, and we'll be implementing those same strategies into our business at the same time, which just breeds, camaraderie and intimacy and friendship and those things that I really want to see thrive within our membership. And so I'm hoping too that this will also allow new members to feel seen and known as soon as they join. So I recently experienced this in a membership that I joined this past year. It's actually a mastermind. And so the way that my coach has set it up, it's kind of similar where like it is closed enrollment. So a bunch of us started at the same time. So we all knew, okay, we're like all fellow newbies, like we're all learning stuff at the same time. But then there are these other folks who had been in the mastermind for like 6 months at that point, and they had additional knowledge to add to the conversation. So it was just kind of like this perfect combo. Like, okay, I wasn't the only new person, but also there's all of these like seasoned business owners who are like pouring into my business. And I wanted to create the same vibe for Secrets of Bridal Seamstress. So I cannot wait. I feel like this is going to help the women in our community feel seen. I think that they're going to receive the resources that they're looking for more immediately and more personally in these live calls as soon as they join. So what you can expect is probably by the time this airs, the membership will be closed. And then we're going to open it up again in mid-September with an open house and showcasing a little bit more of the Six Figure Seamstress Bootcamp as well. Okay, so that is the big announcement. of the membership closing. And I'm really excited. And I know we're gonna have a cap on the number of members that will be allowed in. And we're kind of going back and forth of what that number should be, but I want to be more available to members and just be able to really pour into them and be a better support system for them, or better resource for them. And I feel like this is the best way that I can do that is by closing enrollment. So we'll let you know how it goes, but I'll keep you updated on future changes. I don't see any other changes coming because that's a pretty big one. So I think we're good on the change front for now. Anyways, thank you for listening this far. Thank you for whether it's this point in this current episode or 100 episodes in. I really cannot thank you enough for being here with me and for tuning in. And whether you're watching on YouTube or if you listen as you're sewing, it's really an honor to be with you each week. And I love when you share your responses to the episodes, when you email me back or send me those DMs. It's just really cool. So thank you. And if you feel so inclined, I would love if you could share this podcast with a friend, somebody who you feel like could really glean from this content. And if you would really love to, I guess, send a thank you, please leave a review. You can leave a 5-star review. You can type out something with your review. That would just be so helpful. And it would just help get this podcast into more sewing studios around the world. Okay, well, I guess that's it, and I'll see you on the 101st episode. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and share this podcast with a friend. And if you're feeling really generous, leave a review. Thanks, everyone.